Hello and welcome to Math Matters, a program where we look at the mathematics in our entry-level courses and try to show you, hopefully show you, how that's useful to you in your everyday life. I've got some neat stuff to show you today, so let's get right after it. I want to talk to you about logic again. We've spoken a little bit about logic, but today I want to talk about logical fallacies. And what I mean by that is incorrect logic, how to spot it, how not to use it, those kind of things. The main purpose of all this stuff we do with logic in the first place is so that we can spot valid arguments, we can make valid arguments, and we can particularly keep ourselves from falling prey to an argument that's not valid, not believing what we see. Now, the word valid, what I mean by that is that you take a concluding statement called a conclusion, and that has to follow from all the initial statements, which sometimes they're called hypotheses or premises, either one. They're both correct. But the point is that the argument itself has very little to do with the truthfulness of those statements. It's whether or not the conclusion has to follow from the statements. So let me give you a couple of examples. Now this is a nonsense argument, but it's a good one. If we're to say all bears are cats, and then I say I am a bear, therefore I'm a cat. Well, those are nonsense statements. They're not true, none of them. However, if you take the first two statements as fact, the last statement, the conclusion, therefore I am a cat, has to follow from those two. So we call that a valid argument. Here's another example. If you've ever owned a record player, then you are old. And then if you are old, then you watch Matlock reruns. Therefore, if you've ever owned a record player, then you watch Matlock. Well, again, those statements aren't necessarily true either. I mean, I had a record player, and I'm not old. Well, not real old anyway. But I don't watch Matlock. But the point is that if you take each of those things for truth, then that last statement, the therefore statement, has to follow from the previous two. And so that's a valid argument. Now, the common kind of logical mistakes are called logical fallacies, and there's a lot of these. If you go to websites, you look up logical fallacies, you'll see a lot of them that aren't based on logic at all. They're based on behavior. Proof by celebrity. If a celebrity comes on and tells you to buy a certain product, well, that doesn't mean the celebrity knows anything about the product. It just means that the product company was able to pay for the celebrity. That's what it means. So the ones that I'm going to show you, though, are based in logic. These are logical fallacies in the sense that they mess up, logically they mess up, okay, not because of our behavior. First one I'll mention is the fallacy of the converse. If a person reads the daily news, for example, then they are well informed. This person is well informed. Therefore, this person must read the daily news. Well, see, this is, and that's an argument that somebody might try to make. It's not valid, though, because this says that if the daily news, then well informed. It doesn't tell us the other way. You could be well informed because you watch CNN or because you get your news online or whatever it is. So that is an invalid type of argument. Another would be what's called the fallacy of the inverse. And I'll give you another example. If a person reads the daily news, then they're well informed. This person does not read the daily news. Therefore, this person is not well informed. Now, that sounds perhaps valid, but it's not. When we say that the daily news implies well informed, that statement really tells us nothing about folks who do not read the daily news. And then if we try to draw a conclusion about folks who don't read the daily news, that's not going to be a valid argument. Okay? That business of inverse, the inverse is when you reverse the if and then part. Oh, I'm sorry, not reverse them, but you negate them. You say not this one and not that one. So that's where the name comes from. And then one last one I'll show you, the fallacy of the false chain. For example, if you have ever owned a record player, then you are old. If you've ever owned a record player, then you watch Matlock reruns. Therefore, if you are old, then you watch Matlock. Okay, now what you've got here are two kind of conditional statements that record player imply both old and Matlock. What does that tell us about the connection between the two? Well, it actually doesn't tell us anything. You know, if somehow or another old implied record player, then record player would imply Matlock, and we could draw that conclusion. But that's not the case. And so that would be an invalid argument as well. Okay? And so kind of in closing on this little topic, I'm going to flash up, what I've done is I've taken each of these things and made a kind of put them in symbolic form, and I'll just kind of flash those up as a table right now.